One of the biggest problems in Tarkov that no one discusses is really simple. It's the variance in spawns, that being how good your spawn can be versus how bad it can be. You can spawn right next to your objective, neatly wrapped in a bow. You can spawn in an open field with very little or no cover, only to see 4 geared out loot sponges staring at you. You could spawn in between 3 different groups of players, only to have them all unintentionally team up on you. Nothing like the casual 1v6 by pure happenstance. The lack of spawn logic makes the game less predictable, and sometimes can lead to interesting or incredible scenarios. However, where chaos gives, it also takes, and you will probably die unfairly, as much as you unfairly kill someone. The spawns resemble the philosophy of this game, as said by its creator. You don't like, you don't play. Fair enough, I suppose. The problem of spawns is quite interesting because it causes such a huge imbalance in gameplay completely randomly. One of the maps that illustrates this problem the best is Interchange. The problem with Interchange spawns are that you really have one decision to make if you want to actually play inside of the Interchange, the mall, which is the whole point of the map. The variance in spawn distance from the inside of the mall is massive. Some spawn points are just about inside the parking structures of the mall. Other spawn points are a full minute of sprinting away from the interior. This problem amplifies when you realize the players which spawned closest are gifted all the agency from this random position they happen to occupy. Non-optimally, they could decide to simply turn around and wait for you. This would delay their start to the map, but potentially they could remove a squad or 2 from contending with them. I'm partial to waiting in an obscure or purposefully suboptimal hiding place where they are sure to not suspect you. Why would he prone behind that random duffel bag? Such a dumb spot, says the dead guy. 2, they can sprint into the mall as fast as possible, then loot that part of the map and or set up a defensive position waiting for you to stumble inside, while out of stamina. If it is a squad doing this, they can likely loot the area clean and camp for you at the same time. So purely from randomness, you could be in a position where the part of the mall you are going to is already looted and guarded by 4 players, proned, angle leaning the escalator, you come running up. Either way, all of the agency was gifted to the ones who came before you. Even if you somehow kill them, the most valuable items will be safely stored away. Also, almost worse is the possibility that they just looted and extracted out of the map. Now you just have a half-empty lobby with less loot, and you didn't even get to fight over it. This is not just conjecture either. At one point, this was the meta of Interchange. When Interchange was one of the best maps in the game, when the loot on this map was raining graphics cards which could be worth over $1 million each, what was the prevailing strategy? It was to get a good spawn. Some players like me and my compatriots would load in nearly naked, fishing for the good spawn, the one closest to Techlight, where there could be sometimes 3, 4, or 5 cards. Typically not, but still. When we didn't get the spawn, we would just run in and die. Maybe take someone's knees out with the KS-23, or just suicide into some scavs. Mostly, we had close to zero investment in this strategy and a chance at a massive payoff. A good combination.
The game fucking just frame lags, bro.
And so the meta of hatchet runners plagued the map of Interchange for some time, until the loot was ruined, that is. For even if you went in with a full squad, meta M4s, slicks, hex grids, stims, M995, some of the best gear that you can possibly attain and equip. Oh, too bad. We got a bad spawn. Go next. Even the Chads couldn't do anything about the overbearingly strong spawns versus the weak ones. By the time you would get to Techlight, the promised land, it would be a ghost town. Empty shelves, maybe a corpse of a hatchling who found nothing and despaired. All of this in mind, this map was still probably at its most fun in those times. The rush of a huge payoff that could afford your next 10 raids was amazing. Trying to sneak out of the Interchange with 2 million of graphics cards, armed with nothing but a knife. All the while, troops of bloodthirsty gamers were haunting your footsteps. They suspected a rat has been through here. It took the cards and now is hiding, they thought. Once I hid in the closet for 30 minutes before scampering off, only to be murdered by a scav. I lost out on 2 GPUs worth, which at the time were selling for around 1.6 million rubles each, enough to buy whatever gear you wanted in one run, a run where you began with a melee weapon and a dream. Oftentimes, the most fun or fulfilling thing in a game is emergent. However, I think the same can be said for the most frustrating things in a game. High variance spawns with no spawn logic create more of the latter. If there is a high priority area in a map, the closest spawn should not be 5 meters away, especially if the next closest is 60 meters away. It seems this would be true not only in Tarkov, but in any game that wishes to have an amount of player agency. This pattern continues over pretty much every map in the game, and also cascades into other issues. The map Customs illustrates these issues particularly well. There are 7 spawns which generally are much closer to the center of the map than others. The same with Interchange. This creates a situation where a team spawning in these central locations can take control of an area, gaining heavy advantage in a fight, or they could just loot the best spots and bail. This makes some matches where you might run into a contested area in Customs only to realize it was looted in the first 2 minutes of the game, and the looters have already left. Spawning more centrally also makes you much closer to your exit, making this strategy even more desirable. If you overlay the spawn points with the potential boss spawns, the problem becomes clearer. Bosses typically spawn in highly contested areas, often in close proximity to good loot. Some of the central player spawns almost overlap with boss spawns, and guarantee you first access to these areas. This would be analogous to playing a game of tag if your starting positions were randomly rolled and one of them was touching each other, which defeats the purpose of tag, and the other was 60 meters away, and there's no in between. Before battle state games scrambled the loot, the dorms, or marked room, was the highest valued area in the map by far. It was a room on the 3rd floor of dorms and required an expensive key to open. A good marked room had the potential to make you rich and set you way ahead in the early parts of the wipe cycle. This made dorms a haven for PvP. The only real problem? One spawn of course could get their way faster than the rest. In this case, at least there was one other spawn that was close enough to potentially contest for the marked room in time. However, that is 2 of 30 spawn points, and it was very possible for only one to be occupied. If this happened, then mark room would almost surely be taken with no contest, no fight, which is kind of the point of Tarkov. Even worse, dorms was right next to an RNG based extract, the car extract. It simply had a chance to be there and was 10 seconds away from the marked room. This strategy, if you wanted to call it that, practically made itself. The path of least resistance happened to be a persistent one. The worst spawns on Customs are well known, the dreaded far left side of the map known as Big Red. There are 11 spawns here, and why they are so treacherous is that this section of the map is only connected by choke points. There are 4 choke points, but each of them guarantees some amount of exposure to the enemy fire. Players also spawn just across those choke points, and it's pretty much a guarantee that someone needs to cross. This means it's really up to their aim if they want to shoot you, like fish in a barrel. Imagine you load into Customs to stomp the lobby, fully kitted out, 2 million rubles worth of kit. You spawn Big Red side, and make a run for the choke point, and then you are head-eyed by someone who spawned across the river and simply waited. This may make it sound as if I am not a fan of camping. This could not be any more wrong. The reason why I'm illustrating this point is that the spawns give and take far too much advantage in Tarkov, and seemingly for no reason. Why is it that you need to cross a dangerous choke point if you spawned here? Honestly, I couldn't tell you. I can tell you every time I spawn here, I camp the poor bastards who spawned there with me. It seems the path of least resistance found me in a bush this time. Even though this problem of unbalanced spawns can have some emergent fun, especially for me, the camper, I realize it can make the game unnecessarily random, It can feel like your entire raid is dictated by your spawn, regardless of loot or other players even. Reserve, for example, has probably the most variance in spawns out of any of the maps, and not in a good way. Reserve is a map split between above ground and below ground. Above is a vast military base with a maze of semi-dilapidated buildings, open fields, hills, and courtyards. The underground areas are dark corridors, office rooms, stairs descending down into a bunker. Essentially, the underground is amazing for CQC. The underground of Reserve is actually one of my favorite places to PvP in Tarkov. Above ground, kind of anything goes. Fights in buildings can be CQC, but you might get pinned down by snipers or get stuck in a medium to long-ranged engagement in fields. This can make it very difficult to plan for Reserve. When some of the spawns are so much better for going underground and others for staying above, you might load in with a CQC kit only to spawn in the middle of a field, where you have to cross, you guessed it, a choke point before you can traverse half the map to get underground. When you spawn with a shotgun across the map from access to the underground and there are people sniping, you seem to have been dealt the wrong half of the deck. When I want to snipe all game, I bring my bolt action and a grenade, only to spawn between 3 other spawn points at the mouth of the underground bunker, now where all of them want to go. Don't worry, I planned for this. The grenade I brought was for me. A reserve raid can be entirely dictated by a random spawn, as haphazard as a hand of cards. All of these bad luck scenarios pale in comparison to the worst reserve can give you. Like customs, reserve has a worse spawn, and it's definitely one of the worst ways to spend a raid in Tarkov. In the bunker, bottom left of the map south of the pawn buildings is potentially the worst spawn in the game, in my opinion. It forces you to run out into an open area with no cover. You are surrounded by other spawns which have an advantage over you. They can get into the buildings faster than you and shoot you as you run hopelessly towards them. Even worse, sometimes the boss will spawn in the school. His AI is erratic, sometimes detecting you hundreds of meters away through walls. Other times he will gander at the walls as you kill his guards in front of him. This scav boss is probably the most dangerous one in the game and easily can one-shot you with good gear. So sometimes you get to spawn and you run up and instantly die to the boss, his AI seeing you through the wall, rounding the corner and mercilessly turning you into Swiss cheese with the help of his 6 guards. Oops, you rolled your dice wrong. Please try again. Sometimes design choices can make room for emergent environments that foster creativity and fun. Other times design choices can stifle every choice but one. It might roll a dice and decide your fate. It might do all of these at once. Tarkov has always been a game of extremes, extremely stifling in some ways, punishing, almost cruel. In this same way, the spawns are also extreme. The problem with them is simple. The amount of advantage or disadvantage you seek to gain from just spawning is simply too much. An element of randomness is almost guaranteed in these kinds of games. However, ideally, randomness should only affect so much. If you consider the purpose of the game of Tarkov, I'd imagine you'd consider the main purpose might be fighting over loot. Oftentimes these high variance spawn points seem to circumvent this purpose. You might spawn and immediately die. You might have just spawned far away and now the loot's all taken. Say that it's my goal to kill Rashala, the boss of customs. Knowing that there are player spawns overlapping with his makes this task as much about fishing for the right spawn as it is to fight him. Variance is both a gift and a curse. When more is possible, both good and bad things are included in that. In this case though, I think Tarkov would simply be better if its spawns were more similar to each other. In the same vein that Tarkov can be very frustrating and unfair, it is also incredibly rewarding. Still, I think little things can make all the difference. A nudge, a seemingly puny change can change everything and hopefully captivate you all over again.
Anybody here?